spotlights. Thank you. Yeah, it's showcase time. I have the pleasure to introduce the showcase speakers to you. It's 9 showcases in total, 10 minutes each. Stories from around the world, from Australia to Mexico. The speakers will give us insights on their programs. We will hear about best practices, and we will also hear about challenges they are facing and questions they are trying to answer. I can't wait to get started. Let's start the first round. You can already see the spotlight Codeando Mexico. First off is Oscar. Oscar has been part of the civic tech movement for quite a while. He used to be part of the team of the Laboratorio para la Ciudad and is currently working with Codeando Mexico. And in 2014, Codeando teamed up with the National Digital Strategy Coordinator within the Mexican President's Office to launch a program that aims to change the way Mexico's federal government designs and procures software. That sounds interesting. Please tell us more, Oscar.
I think I can move. Yeah, I can. Okay. So hello everyone. I'm first. It's almost as bad as being the last one. Anyways, I'll try not to mess up things. So Codeando Mexico is an organization that works on public and social issues using technology. We activate the tech communities towards new forms of citizen engagement. That means we work with computers. But first, a little history. In 2013, around 2013, in a hackathon called Desarrollando América Latina, a group of hackers decided that there were a lot of things going on all across Latin America, and they wanted to showcase that work. So they built something called Codeando América Latina, because it was Latin America, and it was about organizations, geeks, and open data being in one place. That evolved, and we built Codeando Mexico. But something happened. The Congress decided to set up an app that would cost 115 million pesos for following their work. But that's around $7.5 million. That's like too much money that shouldn't be spent that way, especially not for just an app. So we decided to make a contest, and we paid the winner 0.01% of that contract amount and an iPad that someone gave us. And we didn't stop that contract from happening, sadly. We're still paying for that app, and they're not really using it. But we learned that there's a big community of hackers interested in working in fixing government. And so we got some funding to build, first, an open data platform that currently has 47 organizations, NGOs, and local governments, also some federal ministries, uploading their data. And we have built a community around it. We have trained people, showing them how to use that data for good, and how to ask their governments for more openness and to be more open to whatever their community is doing. The other thing that we found out is that companies are interested in not just being the next Facebook, but that they can actually build tools and actually work with government and for government, developing software in a new way. So we built this platform called Retos Públicos, Public Challenges. And what it basically does is it provides a whole schema of how procurement should be done. It should be open, it should be public, and it gets the small companies, they have to make less than 4 million pesos a year to sell software to government using agile methodologies, open source languages. And so far, we've had 10 different challenges, more than 1,700 participants, almost 400 companies, different companies that have been trying to sell government new technology. 48 prototypes, working prototypes, something that never happens in government. They just get a final product 6 months after they've bought it. And right now, there are 7 teams developing final products. They, 2 of them won more than one challenge, so that's why it's only 7 teams, which is really good. The final thing is the Red México Abierto. This is a network of local governments, state and municipal governments working together on opening data. And we're giving them the tools because we found out that most of them don't really know how to do it. It's not that they don't want to, but they just don't know how to do it. We're building tools with them in order to allow them to be more open. We've trained them. We've figured out new ways of bringing their communities to their governments. So what's next? We need to grow this. So far, we have 4 cities. The 4th one isn't there yet. One in the 3 biggest cities in Mexico, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. We want to grow more, and we're working with universities and students all around the country to grow that community. And the next biggest challenge is sustainability. We're working to build a sister company for Codeando Mexico called Cívica Digital, who will focus on products and will donate part of that profit to Codeando Mexico to make sure that it will live for as long as Cívica Digital is alive. So we're really excited about that. It's very new, but we're thinking it might be a good way. Hopefully, we will talk more about sustainability during these 2 days. And if you have any more questions, that would be all. Thank you very much.
No? Okay. The next showcase speaker came all the way from Cape Town. His Twitter profile says he's a bread maker, a swimmer, and a geek. And today he's here in his role as tech lead of Code for South Africa, an organization whose project portfolio includes open laws, open budgets, and tools that help citizens to compare the prices of medicine. Give it up for Greg.
Hi, morning everyone. My name's Greg. I'm, as she said, I'm the tech lead of Code for South Africa. We're a nonprofit that promotes informed decision making. We use data and tools and tech to help people make informed decisions that drive social change. We've got 4 major pillars in terms of how we approach this. We work heavily with media. We work with civil society. We're trying to grow our community, and we're just getting our toe into the door and working with government. This is our team. We're almost coming up on 2 years old. We were 4 at the start of this year. We're now at 10, so we're growing, which is awesome. This is where we work. It's literally under a bridge. Nobody believes this. We try and give directions, and only when they actually come and visit do they say, oh, you're actually under a bridge. We are under a bridge. We have cars driving over our roof. It's awesome. There's also bubble wrap on the windows to keep it warm in winter. So it gives us a certain edge. This is a shot from a recent data quest that we have. So we don't hold hackathons. We feel those are too hacker tech focused. A data quest is where we get a bunch of technologists in the room, we get storytellers, media folks in the room, and we get people who work visually. So you can put together infographics and that sort of thing. And we dig through data, we explore data, we find stories, and we try and tell those stories. And this is one that we had recently, where we'll be holding another one in a few months. In terms of civic impact, this is one of our successful projects we've had over the last year or so. We work heavily with community partners, our CSOs, community service organizations. One of those is called Black Sash. They were an anti-apartheid movement. They've been around for 60 years. Since the fall of apartheid, they have they're reinventing themselves as a social justice organization. And we put together some technology for them. The tech's not super interesting, but I'll get to what it is. The tech helped them monitor social service payouts from the state, so social welfare. What we allowed them to do was go in, use a mobile solution, and poll the people there. What's it like to get a social service payout? How do the people treat you? How much did you get paid? Was that what you expected? Et cetera, et cetera. What we did, we helped them crunch their numbers. And the primary output here was something really low-tech. It was posters. It's one of these. That's just got a breakdown of that experience of what the experience of getting a social grant payout is like in each of these centers. What Black Sash did is then they took these posters back to those communities, and they sat down with the community as well as with the SASA, the state partner, and they said, this is our experience. We've got some data behind this. We can actually tell a story here. We can make some informed decisions. And we got these people to talk. And suddenly now, the SASA payout people, the employees, they can understand what it's like to be on the other side of the counter, and the society, the citizens, they have a better understanding of what they can expect. So lots of irregularities were found during this in terms of payouts, misrepresentations, and things like that. But I think that the key draw card here for us was that we can get these two groups to sit together and to talk and make some informed decisions. Another big impact we had recently in the media space, as I said, we work a lot with media, was a tool called Living Wage. The idea behind this is that in South Africa, domestic workers are widely used, but they're a very big gray area. A lot of people don't know what to pay their domestic worker. So you generally turn to your friends, you turn to your neighbor, say, well, what do you pay? Well, I pay, X hundred rand a day. Okay, I'll pay that. It's not informed at all. So the point behind this was not to say this is what you should be paying. It was simply to say, these are the costs that your domestic worker incurs. This is probably what you should be paying to try and get over those so that they can meet those costs. So really it's an argument for something like a minimum wage, but focusing on the domestic worker market. We put this out with a media partner. It had over 50,000 views, which in South Africa, that's very big. We had comments on there. There were over 250 comments, which is the most that partner has ever seen. There were some horrific comments in there. It's like going through YouTube comments back in the day. They were frightening, racist, and just really scary. Adi, our director, he put on his hazmat suits, and he was very zen. And he went through those comments, and he replied and made informed, gave some good, well-thought-out responses to those comments. And it turned out we could distill those arguments into a couple of categories and actually talk about those. Adi spoke about those we had 5 radio station interviews. So this thing made an impact. There was a big discussion. That was our whole point, was to get discussion around this, to make people realize we shouldn't just say, well, I'm going to pay what my next door neighbor or my friend's paying. Let's actually make an informed decision around that. One of our big challenges is data literacy, right? South Africa is one of the most unequal countries in the world. So there's a big gap between the people who really desperately need support and the people who have the skills to provide that support. So that data illiteracy, right down at the level of that Black Sash poster, they don't understand what a percentage means, right? Math skills are poor, numeracy is poor. They don't necessarily understand how to interpret a graph, right? So how do you take information to someone, distill it down to something which they can consume and understand, and make decisions based on that if they don't understand those things? Even if we move up a bit and we're talking about the CSOs, where they do understand numbers and they understand percentages and graphs, but they don't know how to go about taking data and making decisions from that data. They don't know how to gather data. They don't know how to clean data, to analyze data, right? This is one of our biggest obstacles. It's also one of our biggest opportunities. And And one of the big things we've learned is to work with these CSOs. We don't have the capacity, we don't have the skills to drive a product and really reach the people who really need that without working with those CSLs. They know the people on the ground. They can go in and they can interact with them, they speak their language, they can understand the context. We don't. So very rarely will we actually put something out there that doesn't have CSO support. Our biggest opportunity, I think, and our biggest challenge to meet that obstacle is to grow our community. To grow the community of people that can provide the support to the people on the ground, as well as to those CSOs out there and other organizations that need technology to do a few things, that need data literacy skills, that need data wrangling skills, that all of those things. We really want to grow that community. That's going to be critical for us, and this is what I want to get from you guys over the next 2 days, because we don't have the capacity to do this. Looking ahead, over the next year, we're growing. We've got small funds, which is really exciting. We're going to be getting more people in. We've just partnered with an open data group in Durban. They've just launched. That is the second open data group in South Africa, so that's just getting off the ground. We're running a data journalism school this year we've been trying to work with some of the more senior data or journalists to teach them data journalism. And it's kind of hard to teach old dogs new tricks, so we figured you've got to get them young. So we're going to get in young journalists and teach them skills. So yeah, there's a lot going on this year. As I said, we're also starting to get our toes into government. We've got some MOUs to start putting fellows in one of the cities. We're working on another one. During the year, we managed to get apparently Africa's first city open data portal and open data policy. We're trying to drive more of those in South Africa. We're trying to get engagement from those municipalities. So we're trying to get our toes into that door. And the critical thing we need to grow is our community. So I'm very keen to hear how you guys are growing your community. Sounds like that's a common theme, to take the burden off of us and to really open things up. Because especially in South Africa, I think there's such low-hanging fruit. We don't need to build really complicated applications. Sometimes it boils down to teaching people how to use Excel. Basic, simple skills, crunching some numbers, answering questions, and finding the story in data. And with that, we can really empower people to make informed decisions. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg. The next speaker, and I had to look that up yesterday, traveled 10,354 miles to join us. Alvaro came all the way from Melbourne, Australia, where he works with a wonderful team on Code for Australia. When I met them earlier this year, they told me about this vague idea they had about a fellowship program. And now, a couple of months later, they just launched their first round of fellows. So I can't wait to hear the whole story. What projects are you working on, and what are the learnings so far? Alvaro, please.
Thank you. So the first thing that my colleagues said when they saw my presentation was, how are you going to get through 18 slides before 10 minutes? Then I saw Oscar's slides, and I was like, that would be pretty easy. But as you can see, we like to keep things short in Australia. Good day is our equivalent to good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Basically, hi at any point of the day. So good day, I'm Alvaro, and I head our coding efforts in Australia. And what we do in Code for Australia is we want to help governments to innovate by leveraging our community of skilled and passionate contributors. What does that actually mean? Well, we're trying to save government. So we have 3 programs that allow to have a low-risk platform for governments to try new things and get citizens, government, and industry to come together and collaborate. How does that look like? This was our first fellowship. The guy in the middle, his name is Steve, and his role was to populate this new data repository that was built just for research purposes. And in doing so, create cool stuff with the data. That link is to a blog that he made to share his work and to share things like this. So this is the City of Melbourne's portal, as he called it. It's basically everything that you need to know that you're interested in from the City of Melbourne. only that it's updated automatically, and it looks great. It's not the official one, as you would probably, if you go and look for it, you'll find. But that's the URL. And most of the people were thinking that Steve was going to be making like ridiculous algorithms and cleaning data and uploading it. But his purpose and what he was interested in was to make data accessible for those that not necessarily interacted with data. So this was our second fellowship. We were lucky enough to have 3 amazing women working with us. They called themselves the Coder Girls. And their role was to prepare 3 local governments to participate at Australia's biggest hackathon, which is called GovHack, and also highlight or raise awareness that men are not the only people interested in civic technology. So this is GovHack. It went international this year, and it is incredibly popular to the extent that organizers in some cases don't know what to do with sponsorship. I wish we had that problem. But like in all seriousness, like there's a lot of interest and a lot of expectations from local and private organizations onto GovHack. But most of the time what we find is that the challenges that are posed for this event is here's a data set, make the most amazing visualization, or here's a data set, do something cool with it. And we know the potential of a good hackathon, and we know what it can happen, so we helped 3 local governments to prepare for that. The results were much more robust, and hopefully something that those local governments can adopt later in the future. This is our 3rd show and tell. Some of the Code for America folks may recognize Peter. He worked with the Department of Education in New South Wales, where Sydney is, and he created this. It's a school locator. Just like in the US, catchment areas are a pretty big thing, and they change every year, and they not only change where your kid can go to school, but also property prices. So it's very sensitive data that that was already out, but it wasn't being used. Also, as a parent, if you're looking for a school, then you've got to go, well, can my kid go here? But what are other resources and things available for my kid, like after-school help or things like that? So here's a one-stop shop to do that. One thing that we learned from that experience is, so the app was finished about 3 months ago. The department loved it, but we haven't been able to release it. So we have the department, as soon as we were able to finish the app and finish testing, they said, well, what about if people come back to us and contact us, and what if they inquire about the app? And they found that they didn't have the infrastructure to deal with that stuff. Our 4th and last show and tell, this was our first incubator. And it was specifically designed to help build public transportation apps in the state of Victoria, where I'm from. And we partnered with the state government agency of transport to help them build apps. And these were 2 of the winners, so which you can find on the App Store. And my favorite one, which is nearby rhinos. So a couple of years ago in Victoria, the state government agency did a safety awareness campaign to make sure that people were aware of tram crossings, and they painted ginormous rhinos on every single tram. So here you can see all the trams that are in Melbourne, including those in the zoo that are not as harmful as the other ones. One thing that was particularly interesting about this incubator was that what we needed to do was to create 3 market-ready apps, which we ended up doing 6. But what was able to get, what came out from that was that conversation that through the incubation part, the public transport agency started having regular conversations with the developers because they wanted to support them. And through that, they got feedback on their API and a bunch of other stuff. And they've been able to improve those processes a lot more about feedback and communication between the developer community and government. Where has that taken us so far? We found that even though we've done quite a bit of stuff in the last 18 months, and there is a lot of commitment and excitement from federal, state, and local government into this journey that we're having. We're still walking in different ways. There is a lack, we believe, of overarching vision of what can Australian governments do and where and how we should do that. But some kind of like key learnings from us is that experimentation pays off. All of our programs were experiments, and it allowed us to I guess the benefits were two things: that it allowed us to translate that experimenting within government is okay, but it also allowed us to learn a lot from us and a lot from our government partners. The second one is just because we build something, it doesn't mean that we can deploy it. That was the case with the Department of Education in New South Wales. We are now working with them to do that, and they have created they found so much value of the fellowship that they created an ongoing full-time position to do fellowship-style work. So that was pretty amazing. Also, that industry is a hard one to engage. We have been able to connect with a lot of industry partners. Most of the time we have been referred to the marketing department, which is great, but we want to collaborate. And probably the most important one is that apps, hackathons, digital transformation, innovation are trendy. You can just tell that about all the trendy people here in the room. But in all seriousness, those labels have been put on the work with public and private organizations. And before we do put those labels onto those things, we need to pause and reflect, what does that actually mean? So if it means that we create a new body to create new stuff and to do the same things that we were doing before, that's actually not going to get us anywhere. But if you do something, and I'm borrowing some words from Pia Wall, which works at the Digital Transformation Office in Australia, and she defines innovation in a pretty amazing way, and it's got to be personal. So if you believe that innovation is something that you need to do because you really believe that doing things differently can actually help you and help others, then you're on the right track. And it doesn't matter whether you call it digital transformation, innovation, or anything, or you do it through a hackathon, or even if it's just doing your work properly or better. And it's going to take us all, and it's going to take us forever, but then that's the point. Ahead of us, what are we doing? We are going into local government, state government, and hopefully federal government. We're growing the team. I know Australia is not very popular at the moment because it's winter, but trust me, it's pretty mild. And we're going to keep experimenting. We're going to continue to experiment with everything that we do and see where that takes us. So I invite you to come down under.
The next speaker brought his team. The code 4 he's working with is not the code 4 of a single country, but a federated umbrella for a series of national and thematic initiatives, including Code for Kenya, Code for Ghana, Code for Nigeria, and many more. The Code for Africa programs have a focus on collaborations with local media organizations and an impressive project portfolio. Please welcome Justin, the director of Code for Africa. Justin, please tell us more about the current projects and initiatives and introduce your team to us.
Do slightly different. In our part of the world, the very last thing we want to do is make governments more efficient, when very often they're kleptocracies or they're repressive regimes. So we do exactly what Code for America and very many other organizations do, but we try and work from the bottom up instead by empowering citizen champions. In many cases, the media, very often civil society, but more grassroots movements. These are things like unions, churches, and so forth. And then increasingly now, as you heard from Greg earlier on, we're busy starting to flirt with governments. Something happened to my slide, so we're not based out in the ocean, but we currently have. Sorry, guys. Switch that on.
We currently have affiliates in 5 countries at various stages. Some, like Code for Kenya and Code for South Africa, are over 2 years old or approaching 2 years. Others, like Nigeria, Ghana, and so forth, are still in startup mode. And they also adopt different kinds of models. The Code for South Africans are very entrepreneurial, almost like kind of social enterprise driven. Some of the ones in Ghana and Ethiopia are more NGO focused. What do? Well, we try and create active citizenry, and we try and do that by facilitating deeper and more meaningful engagement. The South Africans say that better informed decision making. Often you don't even have the ability to make decisions in many of these societies. So simply getting people actionable information is revolutionary in many of their lives. The kinds of principles that we use with all of our projects across all of these very different organizations across Africa is that they're all super kind of focused on citizen issues, the kinds of things that keep people awake at night. What is it that puts or gets people cold sweats about their children, about their futures, about their own livelihoods, and then trying to see whether data or other kinds of technologies can provide answers to some of those challenges. We try and ensure that any of these solutions that we try and build or that we help people create themselves are hyper-personal, not just local, but that we try and bring it right down to village or to home level so that it's information that is not generic, which is what has happened very much in the past. People only find national level data or information, including from traditional champions like the media. And then anything that we do, we try and ensure is action-orientated. So it leads to, or it gives people the information that they need to take physical, positive action to change things in their societies. This is a photograph from an election queue in Kenya 2 years ago. And you can see that people, even though they're living in largely dysfunctional societies, are really engaged about trying to improve the societies and the economies that they live in. But you've got to be realistic. This is a picture of an actual government records archive in Nigeria, the Ministry of Health. And these are real government records that they asked us to turn into data. So they said, well, we're looking at doing a project around just blood stocks. When hospitals have blood stocks of certain types, at the moment they do not share that information between clinics or hospitals. So you can literally die in a kind of minor operation simply because the hospital doesn't know where to get blood that could save your life. And when we jumped in and we volunteered, perhaps stupidly, that we'd help them solve this, this is where they led us. And they said, well, here are the records. Can you turn this into a cell phone app? Which is actually an opportunity. Because with enough volunteers and scanners and helping people just learn how to use things like spreadsheets, you can actually start improving in a massive way the way that they manage and that they understand the information that they work with. So you can have big impacts with very low investments initially. At the moment, we've been operating for about 4 years. We've got a portfolio of about over 90 projects across the continent. They're not all just data. They range from drones and sensor projects through to citizen reporting, crowd verification, and a lot of media projects. Why media? Because media were the first investors into our program. It wasn't NGOs. It wasn't kind of governments or agencies. Media understood that they were losing relevance in the lives of their own audiences, and they looked at data as a way of personalizing that and creating data-driven news tools. We also help support a far larger community across Africa. There are about 30,000 members of the online community of hacks and hackers. They have chapters, they do monthly meetups, they play with data. And the kinds of things that they build are these kinds of very simple tools. It's the same premise or the same background philosophy as the living wage tool that Greg spoke about earlier on. This was a tool that simply through SMS, driven by spreadsheets on the back, but through SMS and through a very simple website, helped people in Kenya find out where to register for the elections, check whether their registration was correct, and then during the polls, because they tend to be fairly violent, over 1,000 people died in the last elections, the elections before this one. During the polls, the ability to then send peace SMSs, so SMSs to politicians on the Hastings, urging them to not kind of rile up people or create violence. That tool was built for under $1,000, and the Electoral Authority in Kenya said that they saw a marked spike in the number of people going in to register for the elections. It then has been scaled across 5 other countries, including in Malawi, where the government then adopted it as the formal solution, the official solution for checking or verifying that you were registered and that your registration details were correct at least. They identified upwards of 40,000 ghost voters using the system. Again, deployment at a national level cost no more than $10,000. Same technology on the back end, just slightly more sophisticated, but still primarily spreadsheet-driven and the simplest, cheapest off-the-shelf tools that we could find. There's another tool that's had also great success in Kenya initially, and now it's scaled out to 3 other countries, using government-available data that is very difficult for people to access or understand, building simple tools, again, SMS-driven, that allow you to check whether your doctor's registered and is a real doctor, whether they've got malpractice suits against them, whether you're covered by your national health insurance kind of fund for any treatment you're getting, and then to find your specialties. These tools cost us in the region about $250 to build, and the media partner reports that they get 80,000 hits per month, people using the tools. That generates revenue for them, which means that once we've built it, we step back and they maintain and they continue running these projects for us. So we don't become overwhelmed with the technologies we build. The other big thing that we do that's maybe slightly different to what happens up in the north is that we very aggressively focus on government services or on those choke points or kind of friction points in societies that make people disillusioned or disengaged from digital democracies. Corruption is big, and it's not just civil servants. There are corruptors at play as well in the private sector. So with people like Friedrich Lindenberg, who's in the audience here as well from Germany, and others, we've now started to look at using open data to build technologies that help people shine a light on public processes. So not helping government become more effective at procurement, because there are great initiatives from the World Bank and others that are already doing that, but rather giving citizens the tools to shine a very bright light on their procurement process and then figure out who the puppet masters are in their societies. So who are the people behind the deals? And that results in some of Africa's largest and most impactful data-driven stories. We've mapped, for example, the Italian mafia's property and other holdings across Africa in 5 countries. We're about to do another 5 in Wave 2. And we're busy mapping at the moment the ownership of oil rigs and other extractive industries in places like Nigeria, where the Nigerian government says that $18 billion a year is lost just through tax avoidance by people playing games about where they're registered. They're unable to decipher the web companies, the shell companies. Using data, we're able to help them track who the real beneficial owners are behind many of those rigs. And then also in large international collaborations with the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, also shining a spotlight on Australian mining in Africa, and the World Bank itself, using World Bank money and the World Bank's open data policy turning that around and using it, shining a light on them to show how World Bank funding has displaced 3 million people across the world without giving them compensation. All of this built on top of the same kinds of civic data tools that we're using to build service delivery monitors and dashboards. So that's just a very quick overview. I've tried to highlight some of the things that we do that are slightly different to what some of our colleagues in the north are doing. And there are guys right throughout the audience, maybe all the African guys stick up your hands, like the brigade guys. So we've got Kenyans, Nigerians, South Africans, and I think those are the only ones. Our Ethiopian colleague, unfortunately, couldn't make it. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Last showcase before the coffee break, Code for the Caribbean. A code for all partners since the very beginning, and one of the partners that we are constantly trying to convince to host the next summit. I remember meeting Matthew and the team at the first Code for All get-together in San Francisco. While Team Germany was drafting its first concept, the Code for Caribbean team was working long hours to launch their first fellowship program. They did an amazing job. Matthew was working 2 jobs back then. He quit one and moved from DC to Kingston to focus on Code for the Caribbean and the Roots Foundation. Big yay for that move. What is Code for the Caribbean up to? Tell us more.
Hello? Okay, I'm up. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting us and having us here again. We can have the next meeting in Jamaica. So we'll work on that one. Yeah, absolutely. We can work on that. We have a meeting tomorrow, so we can talk about that one. My name is Matthew McNaughton, as was kind of shared a while ago. I'm one of the co-founders of the Roots Foundation, which is a civic tech nonprofit based in Kingston, Jamaica. And what we focus on is design digital tools and services to transform the relationship between governments and the public in the Caribbean. And Code for the Caribbean is one of the initiatives under the organization. And what I'm going to be talking about today a little bit, okay, there we go, is some work that we've been doing in the space of agriculture, and particularly agriculture in the region, and looking at this problem of reflecting like, well, how do we build a more data-driven agricultural sector, and probably relevant to you guys, like why is that important? And so agriculture is interesting in that it's one of the sectors that is particularly sensitive to the flow of information between market participants. There have been tons of surveys that have shown that increased access to information services like prices or market information drastically improves the income of farmers while also decreasing the cost of food, which is particularly important given that by 2050, we actually have to double the amount of food that we produce as a species globally. But at the same time, the risk of persons that hunger is actually expected to increase from 881 million, which it is now, to over 1 billion people who are either at risk of being classified as hungry or are that. And so when we talk about this idea of open data, it really presents a unique opportunity for us to think differently about how access to information that we see and being supported and advocated for across the world can change some of the systemic issues around a sector that, I mean, most people don't think of as very sexy, and is often very closed. And so some of the work that we've been doing is looking at, well, one, how do we apply some of these ideas in the agricultural space, but then, is it moving in the wrong direction now? Okay. But then also, how do we create a sector that's more data-driven? And then within that context, you know, what does that mean for the agricultural sector? Because agriculture itself operates in a context which is predominantly rural and resource-constrained environment, and that makes the challenge of building that type of sector even more difficult. But what does that look like in practice? So in Jamaica, where I'm from, agriculture is actually quite an important sector. And it actually employs almost 19% of the population and contributes almost 10% of GDP. And so what that translates into is about 200,000 farmers across the island in a population of almost 2 million people. But the two agencies that are predominantly responsible for responding to that sector, the Jamaica Agricultural Society and the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, have about 150 extension officers that are charged with serving that community. Now, that doesn't scale. And so what you end up happening is that you have some farmers who don't see an extension officer for 2 to 4 years, some farmers who just don't see people at all, and just a community that is severely underserved in terms of that. And so what we've been doing is working with them to think differently about how they approach the services that they are creating and create a more open way to address and serve that community. And so what that has looked like is really a kind of a radical or a very different approach to designing services and kind of a broader theory of change, which I'm going to kind of explain very briefly. And so at the base, it's looking at, well, the information that exists within the sector, how do we open that up to make it more available for all of the different actors across the sector and the work that they're doing? And actually, this stuff actually, the kind of the opening up the data started in the fellowship program 2 years ago. But then moving on from that, we said to them, all right, well, looking at some of how the institutions operate, not just opening up that data because there's no formal open government policy across the government, but saying, well, for the agencies relevant, how are we working to better share information across those agencies? And we're pretty excited because now there's a formal MOU that's being drafted around data sharing across the agricultural sector within government, which in Jamaica doesn't really happen in terms of data sharing. And so we're looking at, well, how do we better have that conversation and talk about standards across different agencies who are serving the community. Beyond that, taking a different approach to the design of services. And so what we've gotten buy-in to say is for the services that are being created and the ones that exist already, to design them with data and information in mind. Because every interaction with a farmer, every service that's provided a farmer is an opportunity to both check that farmer's information, to verify that the data that already exists is actually valid, but then also to update that information. So if it's a farmer is walking into a government farm store or to an abattoir to get their meat sold, all of those are interactions to really, if data and the services that are being created are integrated, we can now improve the quality of that information. Looking forward, also reaching out to a number of the innovators in the space that exist already that are creating digital services to say to them, hey, how about you use a lot of this data that's being created, but then also contribute back to that commons. And so it's creating this idea of a digital commons of information around the agricultural sector to really overcome some of those challenges. And then just opening that space up to other people through hackathons and events to get more people to come into the space to create services around agricultural space. And so that idea you kind of see emerging is this concept of an ecosystem where in a space that is really quite rural and dispersed, we have different service providers collaborating around the sharing of information to actually build something that's closer to a more data-driven agricultural sector. Mouse switched again. So that's kind of the quick version. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm hoping that spurred a bunch of different ideas and gave you a quick sense of how the civic tech movement works around the world and maybe different from what you're used to. So we're going to have a quick break, about 10-15 minutes. There's still snacks and coffee out here. Join us back at what time? 11:25, I guess. And we'll have the first panel. Thanks.